nature and implications of consciousness in the universe through the fields of quantum physics and the paranormal. No reality left unchecked. No dogma left unchallenged. Q.Science. And now your host for the Q.Science Project, Jill Hansen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Q.Science Project on KGRAradio.com. I am Jill Hansen, founder and host of The Q, which now brings a new episode of New Science Revolution Talk Radio to your doorstep every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific. Every week, the Q-Science Project takes on humanity's greatest questions, and through meaningful discussion with this pale blue dot's most progressive new scientists, philosophers, and researchers, aims to peel back the layers of perception and reality in order to triangulate a unique glimpse of the nature of consciousness itself. In case you missed last week's enlightening conversation with the father of modern-day astrobiology, guest Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, PhD, that episode is available to stream and download from the Q-Science Project archives. Listeners to that show were among the first to learn about the upcoming watershed moment from the field of astrobiology, a soon-to-be-published scientific paper which will prove the theory of panspermia once and for all, and will irrevocably change everything we thought we knew about ourselves and our origins, and the nature of our universe. That insight and more waiting for you at Q-Science headquarters on the web, qscience.org/archives. Before we head into the action, one little request for everyone who's listening in today's broadcast. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. If you would sometime after today's show, please do me a huge favor and go to qscience.org/Q-calendar. And as always, that's spelled Q.PScience.org. Click on the event dedicated to today's show and leave me a quick note in the comment section. Even the simplest message or comment would make a world of difference in knowing who's out there listening, because that does matter around here. Now, on to today's show. Joining me in conversation for the next 2 hours is spiritual teacher and author Maureen J. St. Germain. Maureen has over 25 years of experience in the area of mystical and sacred traditions. Known as the practical mystic, she is a prolific teacher and facilitator of spiritual knowledge who is taught in 24 countries and is the author of 4 books which have been translated into Russian, Italian, and Chinese. She is also an extremely accurate Akashic Records guide and instructor, as well as the composer and voice of dozens of guided meditations. Through today's discussion, Maureen will reveal how each of us can shift our energetic patterns and choose to permanently anchor ourselves in joy, develop a higher self-connection, increase our sensitivity to dimensional signatures, and consciously choose 5D, where love is the governing force. Maureen will also explore how to identify the difference between good versus evil polarized 3D linear thinking and dynamic 5D multidimensional thinking, turning 3D viewpoints around to expand our perception of what is possible. If tonight's show grabs your attention, I highly recommend supplementing what you learn here by getting your hands on a copy of her latest book, Waking Up in 5D, A Practical Guide to Multidimensional Transformation, which is a veritable how-to for developing a deeper, higher self-connection and to consciously choose 5D, where, again, love is the governing force. The book, again, is Waking Up in 5D, and that conversation begins now. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me today on today's Q-Science Project.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think we have a little bit of good news to share right off the bat, don't we?
Yes, we do. I was featured in Retailing Insight because they did a random survey asking for the best sellers, and they had a number of categories: books, meditation tools, fragrance, like that. And in the book category, Waking Up in 5D, the newest book that I've written, came in first place across the nation.
That is something to celebrate for sure. And honestly, I'm not surprised. I mean, I read the book this past week, and I've had several people, once I posted on Facebook that you were going to be my guest this week, had quite a few people reach out to me and express a lot of excitement about your books that they've been reading themselves. And they really find a lot of meaning in your experience and the wisdom that you convey. So congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you to you. I think what you're doing, bridging science and mysticism, is absolutely fabulous. And I'm so excited about the work you're doing because that needs to be done. Get the word out.
It does. Yeah, we have to come back to center, which means everything has to make sense. And it only makes sense when we're looking at the greater picture. And that includes both science and mysticism. Absolutely. So, well, let's go ahead and start with a little bit about you, Maureen. Most people who do what they do, and, especially in your line of work, they come into this life basically being meant to do that work. So how early on in your life did you know that this is what you're going to be doing?
Well, I've always been using my gifts. And I was using my gifts before I knew I was using my gifts. So, I remember stories from my childhood where I remember a story that when I was in kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher was asking what my phone number was, and I didn't know it. And then she asked what my address was. And I looked at her and I said, "Why are you asking me these questions when the answers are on the paper in front of you?" Because, in kindergarten, I wasn't accustomed to the idea of a test.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at her thinking, she's looking at the paper. She knows what it is. Why does she need it from me?
Right.
You see? And how did I know it was on the piece of paper in front of her? Because I could see in my mind's eye that she could see it. And my mother also had this gift and accurately predicted that her last day on Earth at age 92. And I've always been very connected to spirituality from the side of appreciating the ascended masters, the angels and the saints. And so when my children were little, I imagined that I would be helping other people, and I made practice tapes. Now, I didn't even remember doing that initially, but I came across a cassette tape that I had made, and I was able to date it because there was a baby crying that I picked up and put to breast. So I knew when it was.
Wow.
And,
when you say you didn't remember, do you mean, are we talking about this was channeled and so your conscious self didn't have awareness of having done this? Is that what we're talking about? No? Okay.
What it really means is that I was so busy being a mom and running a family, and we moved many, many times, that, even though I knew I wanted to do this, I had forgotten that I had made this tape. That's what I meant.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. But I was envisioning that I was helping other people.
Yeah.
And this is one of the principles of the manifestation work that I have taught that's based on sacred geometry. And what I did is I went into this. I was very big on the sacred geometry because I taught the Merkaba for so long. And I had been teaching on sacred geometry in manifestation before I taught the Merkaba. And in the process of all that sacred geometry stuff, I was able to prove scientifically why manifestation works and why the particular method that I call either the genie system or the Phoenix sequence proves that there is a ability in all of us to manifest because we carry these mastery codes in us, and all we have to do is understand it. And we don't even have to understand it. All we have to do is use it, which is quite amazing. Yeah.
So this book, Waking Up in 5D, there's a little bit of everything in here. I mean, this book will appeal to so many different people. So talking about 5D. So my takeaway from this book, so 5D is basically, or you've also called it ascension, is characterized by a vibrational state. It is a vibrational state characterized by group consciousness, unconditional love, absence of fear, an emotional state with evident compassion, the merging of mental and emotional processing of information. And even probably the most interesting statement you made was no more karma. You were saying that in this state, and this is a state that humanity as a whole is moving towards, no more karma. So what does that mean for us?
Well, it's very interesting. That message came through initially in 1994 or 95, because I remember where I was when I first came out publicly. And I thought I would do a trial balloon, if you will, on some very good friends of mine who were devout Buddhists and who were also students of the Merkaba and the spiritual work that I was teaching. It was not received well. And I I remember thinking, oh man, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And then they said, how can this be? They were really emphatic. And I said, you know what? I have no idea. I haven't figured it out myself. Now, this was over 20 years ago. I haven't figured it out, but what I know for sure is there's no more karma, and I will keep you posted. So here's what I learned over that time period in terms of my meditations and the downloads that I received from Spirit. Because we're moving to a zone where there is no polarity, karma is no longer needed to keep score.
Oh, that makes so much sense when you say it like that.
And if you are keeping score, it will keep you in third dimension.
Right. Right.
Because
exactly.
You can't move out of 3D or even 4D if you're holding judgment or you're holding anger or you're holding resentment. So all this stuff, you have to decide, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to unhook. I'm not playing this game anymore, which is why I say it's not that the rules have changed. You're playing a different game. And if you adopt the game early, then you get to be ahead of the curve and you get to enjoy the fruits of that. And it's also like looking at American football and looking at European football, which is really soccer. And you start comparing those two kinds of games. Football is very hard on the body.
Yes.
There's known effects, scientifically proven, even though the NFL has tried to squelch it. Soccer, on the other hand, is a gentleman's game. And they're not allowed to hurt each other. And they deliberately play a different way so they don't create problems and they don't need gear to protect themselves.
Yeah.
So we're moving from football to soccer in a way, if that's helpful to people, because it begins to make more sense that way.
Absolutely. And so just to kind of situate people in what we're talking about. So we just explained 5D, but then 3D and 4D. So 3D is characterized by polarity, good, bad, basically these opposing ideas, right?
Right. And we chose this for ourselves. We chose it because we wanted to go deeper into the physical matter and to experience these things. Right. What happened is man's inhumanity to man has gone too far. And so the game is over. The plug has been pulled and we're all headed back. So there's a couple of metaphors. Number one, man's inhumanity to man was not 100% driven by man's behavior. There were forces that were the guardians of humanity that felt they could push man's evolution along if they got them to fight with one another because they would use science to build war machines. That was the thinking by those guardians. They went against cosmic law because they were told not to do that. They were told to do it a different way. And they didn't want to follow what was given, so they had the ability to change because they were in the free will zone as well. But the rules came down that those angels that were, now we call them the fallen angels, had their way, but now that I'll call it the reverse is on, they can't do that anymore. They're not permitted to do that anymore. And so there's a lot of things that are, quote, not permitted. You're not permitted to have more than one soul in your body. And so anybody who's carrying around their dead grandpa or their dead mom can evict them with grace and ease, or anybody they picked up at a hospital or a cemetery or some other place that they may have been. And this happens a lot. And that's, one of the things that we like to let people know about. That's why we talk about clearing work. And it also means that this whole a way of being that, man's inhumanity to man is over. And because it's over, the plug has been pulled. Now, when the plug is pulled, not everybody gets the message. Not everybody stops doing what they've been doing. So what happens is some parts of the globe haven't caught up with the new I'll use the word dictum or the new rules, but they will, because just like, during World War II, there were sections of the South Pacific, I believe, that were still fighting after the war was over. We can see some of that in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
So as we look around, the sooner you say the war is over, let's celebrate, you're going to adopt a different behavior. Your energy changes. It's like at breakfast every morning. My husband used to talk about the things that he didn't like. So he would say, did you, if we go on a morning walk, did you see that house? They've been doing all this remodeling and they left all the trash on the front lawn, or something that he sees that's not pleasing to the eye.
Yeah.
So one day I said to him, let's talk about what we do like. And then that gradually evolved to a thing where we talk about our gratitude. And we have to come up with 3, and we alternate. So he names one and I name one. He names one and I name. And that's part of our breakfast routine.
Nice. That's wonderful.
So it's set the tone to be 5D, to be in a place of gratitude and appreciation.
Okay. So in talking about parts of the population who do get the memo right off the bat and start adopting it. Now, what is the mechanism by which the rest of the population, is made aware of this new dictum and adopts it? And how long of a transition does that? How long does that take?
Well, it could take a number of years. And what I know for certain is that it is inevitable. So like resistance is futile because the balance has already tipped. So the teeter-totter is already tipped in our direction, and there's no stopping it. So that's the good news. And it also means that when we hear stuff that somebody did, and that's part of the transformation, we discover things that were hidden from us that were, stuff we didn't want to know, but now we're knowing everything. So we're now discovering stuff. Let's say you discover that your beloved has had an affair, but it was 5 years ago. And they love you now and they want to be with you now. And they've loved you the whole time. They just, they just had a slip up or a aberration, whatever you want to call it. But they don't want to end the marriage. But now you're the one discovering it, even though it happened 5 years ago. What are you going to do? Are you going to go crazy? Are you going to punish them? Are you going to suffer and make them suffer? Or are you going to look at it and say, you know what, this really upsets me and I don't like it, but I get it that it happened a long time ago. I get it that you're devoted to me. And I also get it that you actually became more devoted to me because you realized how close you came to losing me.
Yeah.
And that takes a bigger picture. And the only way you can make that bigger picture is if you decide you don't want any more karma, because it means you're not going to hold anyone else to karma as well.
Wow.
So there's some ways you can be proactive. And I talk about that a lot in the book. And one of them is to announce, I want to be proactive. I want to wake up in 5D. And then by choosing to be proactive, you adopt what I call fifth dimensional language. And fifth dimensional language is very cool because this is something that happened to me. People would start to use words that were perfectly normal, and I was cringing like they were using swear words.
Right.
And I started thinking to myself, what's with that? And I was immediately shown that they were part of 3D language that did not need to be part of 5D language. And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
What's the right way to do something? Well, if there's a right way, there's a wrong way. Why not say, this way is a match for me? And it doesn't imply that there's a wrong way that I might have chosen. And think of this. When we now buy a car, a secondhand car, we don't call it a used car. We call it a pre-owned car. And the pre-owned car sounds nice. It sounds like the dealer has cleaned it up, run it through a bunch of checks, made it perfect for me. So a pre-owned car is a example of how you can change how you want to talk about things to a very 5D expression. So good and bad, those are another couple of words. Now, what do you do? How do you talk when you want to talk about, something that's really good? You can say it's cool, it's awesome, it's stunning, it's fabulous. If you want to say something is bad, instead of saying bad, you could say not yet, divine timing. Instead of calling something a bad or a negative experience, you could say it's an interesting experience. And no intonation. Like I used to use, and I am not the only one, we all used to use the word weird. And we don't just say the word weird, like, gosh, that was a weird conversation. You say, that was weird. You notice how my voice drops down. So I'm using my intonation to add a quality of disapproval, a quality of this wasn't nice, this wasn't positive, this wasn't a good experience. So if everyone could just say weird without the intonation, that would be fine. But people don't. And oh, by the way, all the words we use have a vibrational data set that goes with them from all the other people who've been using them. And this is also why I tell people, stop using swear words. Even the G word or the D word, think of all the people who have used those with intention and fierceness, with hurtful thoughts. And you're tapping into it.
Yeah, but let me propose this because I will tell you, I drop F-bombs all the time at home, but it's intentional, and for me it's a much different, the word means something a lot different than a lot of other people. Now, if I'm using it with a much different intention, because for me it's more about finality, and it doesn't feel the same to me when I say it as it does to someone else. Now, if I'm using it in a more positive, what feels like affirming way in my life, aren't I adding to the collective use of that word and hopefully like raising the vibration of it?
You're one person against millions.
Okay.
So yeah, you're right. You are raising the vibration, but how much can you do? One person against millions of people who use it in a very hurtful, harsh way.
Sure,
and think about this. I grew up Catholic. We did the rosary. I did the rosary for, 10 years after I quit being a Catholic because I loved saying the rosary. It was so powerful. I could feel how powerful it was. And I'm tapping in at the time, I would be tapping into the energy of calling in the Divine Mother. And that's bigger than me when I'm saying the same prayer that everyone else is.
Wow.
And in my case, I actually, I used a New Age version of the Rosary. So instead of the, sin, dying, and death, I changed it to, I used a more modern version that came from a New Age church that I was with, where they used a phrase of, this and our resurrection into the light kind of a word. And so there was a slight change like you're suggesting, but it wasn't, there were a lot of people saying it that way, not just me. I was one of thousands that were doing it that way. So your point is well taken, but I don't think you personally are powerful enough to stand against that wave of humanity that's doing it the other way. And that's what you have to realize. And so think about this. It's powerful and it's impactful, but you are still being used because somebody who hears it, and even your own subconscious, taps into this whole feeling of what that word means. And it could be the finality, but find a new word that would work for you that doesn't carry that energy, that tradition.
Sure. Well, let me ask you then, because this is a really important part of the conversation, because words, I'm a writer, and words are very, very powerful. And I always use, like when I'm writing, I'll take, a couple of minutes on a given word just to make sure that the word that I'm using truly and purely conveys what I need to be saying in that sentence or in that moment. Now, if we're applying what we just kind of talked about, let's use the word feminism, okay? Now, this is one of those terms which we're hearing all over the place in this day and age. A lot of people don't understand what feminism is in its current incarnation. There's a lot of animosity, used towards the word. However, the word itself, used by the people who are feminists and who know what feminism is, it's an extraordinarily positive thing. So this word, who has these two really, again, polarized factions who believe it to mean two different things, how does that situation reconcile itself?
Well, I think you make a very good point. And in that case, there's probably a pretty good balance. And then I would think, this is my opinion, that the positive side of feminism is bigger than the former disdainful side. And I'll tell you why. People like Cheryl, the president of Facebook, what's her last name?
I have no
wrote
idea.
about it. Well, if you haven't read her book on her first book, it's a worthy read, especially anybody who's interested in feminism, because even Cheryl said, I never considered myself a feminist, even though I strongly believed in women's rights and privileges.
Yeah.
And she tells a story in her book about she was complaining to her husband about the fact that, while she was pregnant, she was aware of how hard it was to walk into the office some days from the car.
Mm-hmm.
And, the pregnant women had even a bigger problem. And he looked at her and he said, now remember, the two of them are presidents of two companies. He's no longer living. He died in a very odd situation, and he had an aneurysm. People thought it was an accident, but it was just an aneurysm. Okay. But he was president of SurveyMonkey, while she's president, and she still is president of Facebook. So he looked at her with surprise and said, at our office, the pregnant women have all the front row parking. If you're pregnant, you get to park in the front row. And she had not thought of that. Now, that's very cool, because obviously her husband is a feminist because he's thinking proactively in his company.
Yeah.
And secondly, she said, I realized I was a feminist. And so that's what's happening to a lot of us, that we weren't trying to be part of that fight movement, but we were willing to stand up for our power. And it's a little bit like Gandhi making salt. We're ready and willing to stand up and claim our rights and our power.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more positive on the word feminism than people realize. And so, that the weight swings in our direction.
And honestly, I think that, it's kind of a big statement, but I would say that I think that most of the people who don't consider themselves to be feminists, or, kind of don't enter that arena, it's because they don't understand what feminism truly is. But
right,
again,
they don't know. They
frankly
don't know.
Don't understand, right? It's not. Yeah. And the show isn't about feminism, so we're not going to go there. But anyway, I that's one of those words that, in the heart of it's a really, truly positive, amazing thing. But it does have, probably almost an equal misunderstood, animosity towards the word itself and what it, what it stands for. But anyway, I guess going from this conversation into, you do discuss the divine masculine and the divine feminine in the book. And one of the really, really powerful things that you wrote, which, I've really internalized, is you talk about how the grids have been upgraded, right? Which means, the way I interpreted that was that the divine masculine and feminine are now brought to current state. And you said that the masculine no longer has anything to prove or conquer.
Yes.
So,
and that's very cool, because in the old state, the man devoted himself in service to the service of a general, let's say, or the service of the service, or the service of some job or something. And the woman devoted herself to helping him. And that was the old way. And the new way, the man is the champion. He has mastered himself and the world around him, and he can achieve whatever he wants as a co-creator. And the woman is an equal partner. So she gets to do the same things he gets to do. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Right.
Does it change the bias a little bit?
Well, right. I mean, it feels much more balanced and authentic, right? Because this allows men who may not come into the world, wanting to break rocks and climb mountains, really, truly be able to embrace and immerse themselves in their authentic self, however that manifests, whatever feels right to them. And that's so much more healthy people are going to come out of that paradigm.
Mm-hmm. That's all true. So, one of the things that I teach in a number of my books, because it's so important, is this whole thing about the higher self and the connection to the divine self can be learned and can be brought to 100% accuracy. And that's mind-boggling to people. But when you open up that channel and you work the channel, it becomes so easy and so natural. And I'm reminded right in this exact moment of a situation where a family member was having a baby, and I got the message that it was a girl. And a little baby boy was born. And I remember thinking, how can that be?
Yeah.
Again, I was shown a little girl, and then I was shown the family member that had reincarnated in that little boy.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, how long ago was this? How old would that child be now?
2.
Okay. Wow. Now, how well do you know the family, and how much time do you get to spend with that child? And is there any, evidence of that previous incarnation?
I'm going to be spending some time with that family next weekend. And we're going to be sharing a house, and I'll get to see a little more of this youngster.
Oh my goodness, so wonderful. Now, did you share with them this information that you'd received?
No.
Okay.
And that's because I feel very strongly that just because I get that information doesn't mean I should tell them. That's number one. Number two, I'm not convinced that they subscribe as fully to the spirituality stuff as I do. I will say that family does listen when I talk to them, because I've predicted a number of things and have given them information in advance that literally saved lives, which was pretty cool. So, the storyline goes like this. If I can, couch it in bigger terms, because I don't want to reveal who it was. But,
sure.
I was given a lucid dream where I saw what was happening, and I asked if I was supposed to alert that person, and I was told yes. And when that person received the information, they responded in a typical way, like, we're always careful, something like that, And I said, well, I know you'll know what to do. I didn't give them an action plan. I simply told them what I saw.
Okay.
Some months later, when this same person saw a scenario, he was preparing for something. Mm-hmm. And he'd done his I will call it his normal checks on, when you check your equipment before you do something, right. And like before you get on your motorcycle or something, you check, make sure everything's okay. And he suddenly remembered, coincidentally, this thing that I had talked about to him, and he decided to do one more round of just checking things out. And I will tell you on the side, I did do a lot of spiritual work and asked that the circumstance be mitigated and transformed. Okay. So I'm doing my part to support a transformation. So this person, this family member, chose a different action when he had the visual. Okay. And everything changed. I mean, he went one more time of checking, and by the time he finished the checking, the whole need to do what he was doing changed. Not only for him, but for all the people who needed him to do it. Wow. Everything changed. And I tell people what happened is there was a change in the trajectory. So instead of following this line to that outcome. He changed the line a little bit by doing one more thing, and it put him on a different trajectory, which allowed him to access the blessings that I had called in.
Oh my
And,
goodness.
everything changed. Everything changed. So he had to use his free will.
Mm-hmm.
In the dream recall. That wasn't enough, because that was just kind of floating back into his mind. He had to decide to do one more thing before he went ahead. And he did.
Right.
And that's all it took, changing the reality. So we can change the reality. And that's one of the very important things. And then the other thing is this whole thing about the time-space continuum. And lots of people, if you ask, will report that happened to me. I just didn't know what it was, and I forgot about it. And that's the thing that happens in 3D versus 5D. And I know I've skipped over 4D, and I don't know how much time you have, but what happens in 3D, if something occurs that doesn't fit the current paradigm, we usually blow it off. And in 5D, you're able to look at it and ask what's going on. And when you do that, you're telling the universe, I want to know the full story. So the time-space continuum is a template, and we can go back and change things. And we can also change difficult things. So for example, I have taught the people that are in my year-long program, the Ascension Institute, how to go back to a very difficult situation, rewrite the script, and they change in 3D right here, right now. And a good example is a crying baby in a crib who is left to cry. Okay. And that was, my mother's generation. They felt that was important to do it that way.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So, the woman is older. And she went back and she sent a version of herself to pick up the baby and hold the baby and teach the baby that the baby was safe. And that changed who she was as a human, because it fixed that wound.
Yeah.
So,
wow, that is mind-blowing.
And there's other examples of the time-space continuum where you show up at a place where there was trauma. And if you're related to the trauma, you will remember it. If you're connected to the person in a very close way, when the trauma occurred, you'll experience it. And I'll give you an example. One of my kids was driving over a mountain pass in Montana. He had never driven this road before. He was with his girlfriend. They were moving her stuff. And he called me that night and said, did something happen on a mountain pass in Montana? Blah, blah, blah. Well, he was with me when I was crossing that mountain pass in a little car, going too fast. I hit a patch of ice and flipped the car, and we landed in a snowbank, perfectly upright, totally safe. But obviously, he didn't have to go to school that day, and I didn't have to go to work that day. But it was, he drove by it. He opened that time-space continuum by his presence, and there's a way to do that, to open that portal and access memories or whatever. Yeah. Very cool stuff.
Now, out of curiosity, which pass was that? I spent a lot of time in Montana, so I wonder if...
The Bozeman Pass.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating. Now, in the book, Waking Up in 5D, you talk about the dynamic view versus linear time. So this, what you're talking about now, this would be what you're referring to in the book as collapsing timelines. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Or is that something
collapsing timelines?
Okay.
There is such a thing as collapsing timelines, which I can explain in a second. But what I was talking about is opening a portal to a previous timeline and identifying what happened and healing it, transforming it. Now, that would allow the timelines to collapse. So the timelines that are collapsing are the other versions of you. The guy that asked you to marry, you said yes, and then you changed your mind. That's a timeline that you created. And there's another version of you that marched down the aisle with that guy. And then you stop funding it because you didn't follow through. But there's energy to support that for a little while. And then after you've funded it a certain amount, it ceases to exist. But it is added to the database. But it is not the primary thing that exists.
Wow. Now, in your book, you talk about starting a practice, right? The 45 days, you say you want to take at least 45 days. And this is the attempt here is to, through 45 days of being present with this, being conscious of how you engage, what the language you use, asking questions, basically making contact with your higher self.
Uh-huh. Well,
how
go
ahead.
The 45 days is based on a scientific discovery that in 45 days we create new DNA. So if you do anything for 45 days straight, you're actually recreating you with this new data in it. That's why I always tell people to do things for 45 days to get a real transformation.
Okay. Now let's talk about that, because this sounds like a really amazing, phenomenal tool for daily life. And of course, for this transition to 5D and kind of expediting that process. So can you walk us through what one has to do during that 45 days to, make substantial contact with our higher selves?
Yes, I can. So the first thing to understand is that there's the 7 things that you need to do to create this ability within yourself. And those 7 things are agreements that you agree to when you start. And the first one is the 45 days. So that's kind of easy.
Okay.
Just a minute. And then the rest of the rules have to do with how you use what we're going to teach you. So I walk people through a quiet meditation, and we can do that real fast right now to kind of get get it going. And then you use that tool that you get in the meditation to, what do I want to say? To achieve this level of mastery that allows you to have the access. Now I'm looking up my little set of rules here, but I can probably find it in the book faster. So the first rule, as we know, is the number of days that you commit to. And then the second thing is you are going to, in the meditation, we're going to get a symbol or signal for yes, no, and neutral. And the symbol or signal can be a color, it can be a shape, it can be a feeling in the body, like an itchy ear or a queasy stomach. It can actually be someone saying the word yes to you. Some people actually hear it. It could be a tone that you hear when you're asked, what is my symbol or signal for yes? So I take people to a little meditation. If we have time after explaining the rules, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
And then with that key, the answer key of yes, no, and neutral, you then write down what you got. I got this for yes. One woman got an itchy ear, then she got an itchy toe. Each time she said, that's not good enough for me. I'm trying to focus here. I'm waiting for my sign from my higher self, body calm down. Yeah. And then her whole body started to itch. And then she, of course, in her meditation says, all right. I'll take the itchy ear, So you're looking for some kind of sensation. And 90% of the people get something. So it's pretty easy, even people who aren't used to doing this kind of thing. So the second thing is only yes, no question. So you only are allowed to ask questions that could have a yes or no answer. Next, you only ask unimportant questions. So that's a key. You ask about stuff you don't care about. And the reason you do that is because the way humans make decisions is they rely on past data. Now, I'm not talking about some spiritual person that uses their intuition right away. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about someone who has not followed their intuition at least once in the last 2 months. And that's how you know if you need this protocol or not. If you 100% follow your intuition every single time, you have that connection. But practically everybody I talk to says, well, I do have good intuition, but I don't always follow it. So that means you need the practice, because the practice hones your skill. And the reason it hones it is because you're only allowed to ask about unimportant questions so you can hear it. Because if you ask about something you care about, whether it's the donut or going out with that cute guy, you've already got your energy body all around it and you want it.
Yeah.
And so now
Yeah.
that's going to influence your decisions. You have to ask about stuff you really don't care about. So if you truly don't care whether you get the green tea or the black tea, then you ask your higher self. If you don't care about what you order in a restaurant, you look at the restaurant menu and you ask higher self, is it my highest and best good to eat this? No. What about this? No. What about this? No. Higher self, is it my highest and best good to eat here? No. So you might get up and leave. If you're by yourself, if you're with friends, you don't ask that question because you're not going to get up and do that. Okay. The third thing, the fourth thing is you always follow through. So you'll notice I said you don't ask that question because you're not going to get up and leave with friends, right? But if you were with friends who were doing the same thing as you are, you could say, I'm checking in. I'm getting told we're not supposed to eat here. You guys check in and see what you get. And they're all going to get the same thing. Don't eat here. So you get up and leave. Then the group of you could get up and leave. But you don't ask if you're not willing to follow through. So if you've got your eye on that piece of chocolate, just eat it and enjoy it. And don't, for God's sake, don't quit smoking by asking your higher self during your practice period, because everybody who's smoking likes to smoke and they get a benefit from smoking, or they get that, the nurturing response or whatever they get. This is not a time to be asking about that. Just have your smoke, learn the process, and then later check in. Do I need to, put that aside? Next. Do not ask predictive questions. Now, this seems self-evident, but I had to add this as a rule because people were trying to do prediction. And prediction could be something as simple as, will the light change before I get to it? Or is it going to rain today? Now, the way I tell people to deal with these things is don't ask if it's going to rain today, because that is you asking what I call the second last question. Because if you asking if it's going to rain today, it's so you know what to wear or you know whether to carry an umbrella. Why not just ask, what am I to wear? Or do I need to carry an umbrella? And I've gone so far as to ask, which umbrella? Now that gets very interesting, because one time on a cloudy day, I was told to carry the cane umbrella and I never opened it, but I used it when I tripped and didn't fall.
Interesting.
Let's see. And finally, you're not allowed to use any other form of divination for the 6 weeks of practice. So you put away your pendulum, you quit doing methyl testing, and you set all that stuff aside so you don't complicate the issue. Just like you don't try to learn German and French at the same time. You don't try to utilize those skills simultaneously. And certainly if you were going to do an immersion program, this is what this is, because you're asking unimportant questions 30 or 40 times a day, what happens over 6 weeks, in addition to getting the new DNA, you also give your mind the proof it needs to rely on that history. Because remember what I said, how humans make decisions? They base it upon research, they base it on their own history, and they base it on other people's history. So it's all data that's historical. So and then finally, and this is the best part, after your 6 weeks, you can ask any questions, and your higher self can now start coming in and talking to you, because it's a one-way door. But after 6 weeks of asking 40, 50 times a day, the door gets propped open. Then your higher self comes in and tells you stuff you didn't know you needed to know. And that's very cool. And now you have your failsafe. Is this my higher self telling me X, Y, Z?
Wow. Okay. And so basically, once you have this connection, the idea then is to just trust wholeheartedly the information that you're getting and following through.
Well, it isn't about trust. This is the thing. Trust is you and me deciding to meet for lunch and not canceling.
Right. Yeah.
Belief is knowing, like the sun's going to come up.
Yep.
And the reason I say it's not about trust is because you've got historical data that shows you're by yourself and you're asking what restaurant to go to. You go to a certain restaurant and you see a friend and you get to join them for lunch. Or you decide to do something based upon your higher self, and some other yummy thing happens as a result of it. And you wouldn't have had that happen. Maybe you meet someone new that can help you with your work. And because you were told, your higher self said, yes, you need to go to this event. You're tired, you don't want to go, but you're willing to go, like that. That we've all had those moments, whether we should go to a mixer, whether we should go to someone's birthday party. We're tired, we've had a good day. Do we really need to add that or not? But if you ask your higher self, you truly don't care. Then if your higher self says go, and you go, there's some other piece that you're going to get that you don't know about. And sometimes you don't even know the benefit till later.
Yeah. Okay.
And not every time is a benefit. But what happens is when you do this practice about stuff that you're labeling as unimportant, what happens is you now collect data that proves your higher self is always right. And so once you realize that your higher self is always right, then your ego wants your higher self to make decisions, because your ego ultimately wants you to be happy. And your ego wants you to be happy based upon your own data set. So you have to change the data set and add that piece.
Okay, that all makes sense. Now, after this 6 weeks is up, and you're talking about, after that point, the door stays open. So your higher self doesn't necessarily wait for you to ask the questions. It just offers information. Now, how does one decipher between the voice of their higher self and the ego or these other aspects of self that sometimes we hear these voices?
The first thing I tell people is you go back to that failsafe and you ask the question, is this my higher self telling me yada, yada, yada? And the cool thing is only your higher self is allowed to say yes. And I have avoided car accidents because my higher self came in and told me to do something that is completely wacky, completely unprofessional. And I was behind a semi in the airstream. And then the semi moved off to the berm. And we were both on a ramp. And I normally wouldn't take a ramp at full speed like a semi does. Yeah. But my higher self had told me to do it. I had asked twice. I was on the freeway when it came in. And then we both made the same turnoff. And again, I was told, stay with the truck. And then when the truck went on the berm, I asked again, am I supposed to go on the berm? Yes, no. And I did. And another car came going the wrong way on this interchange.
Whoa.
And it was it was late at night, 10 or 11 o'clock at night. There's no way I would have been able to avoid that. I'm actually, there is a way, and I had the way, and that was it. I wouldn't have had, I'm not grounded. My kids say that I'm not grounded, and they laugh about, we could even lose her in a department store if we wanted, to make a joke. But I could get it from upstairs, but I couldn't get it from the ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess how I know.
Okay. Now, this fail-safe that you're talking about, now, is this an intention? So during the 45 days when you're kind of, I don't know if programming is the right word, but you practicing. Okay. When you're practicing and you have, your own unique language for yes and no. Now, this fail-safe, when you say only my higher self is allowed to say yes in the situation. Is that something that you have to reiterate each time? Or is it you said at the beginning and like all parts of yourself just like say, okay, we agree? How does that work? What is that?
There is a protocol to how you ask your higher self. So your point is well taken. And the protocol is very simplistic. You always say the name. And it comes from a very simple idea that, when I had 4 kids, if I said, can I have a glass of water? Somebody get me a glass of water. They would all look at each other and nobody would move. But if I said someone's name, then that son would get me a glass of water.
Hey.
And so the same is true if you ask, and this has actually happened to me. I asked a question, should I go out with that cute guy? And my higher self answered yes. And later when the date turned out pretty ordinary, I came home and I stood in front of my altar and I complained. What was that all about? That was a big waste of my time. And my higher self came in and said, you never asked. And I said, yes, I did. Blah, 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 blah. And they interrupted me and said, oh, no, you asked, but you didn't specify higher self. And your lower self answered. And my lower self is my desire body, the little girl in me wanted to be special, all that jazz.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I'm all in.
So let me give you one last hint because I know we're getting close to time.
Wonderful.
This is for all of you to gain access to 5D in a really fast and easy way. Say this little prayer. I am asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with. Once a day.
And how does that work? What is the mechanism behind that's such a powerful statement that it's going to get us there? Is it the words? Is it what heaven means to us? Is it, again, going back to the collective interpretation and use and belief in the word heaven?
You got it. Okay. Heaven on earth is 5D.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Right. Pretty good observation.
That sounds so simple.
It does.
But then
but all you have to do is try it. And here's the thing. Try it for 2 or 3 days and then stop. And you'll immediately see the difference. Don't take my word for it. Try it for a couple of days.
I'm going to try it and then I'll get back to you. Okay, everyone. It is time to pause for a word from our sponsors, but don't go anywhere. Right around the corner, the Q will return with spiritual teacher and author Maureen J. St. Germain and more insight into waking up in 5D. You are tuned into the Q.Science Project on kgradio.com, your contact for New Science Revolution Talk Radio. We'll see you right back here in just a moment. Stay with us.
As you know, recently we've been dealing with many natural disasters, and a lot of people have lost contact with their loved ones for days, even weeks. Others in the most vulnerable moments were unable to contact emergency services and call for help because of these potentially life-threatening circumstances from hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, and even rogue nations such as North Korea. Satellite Phone Store made satellite phones an affordable solution to being prepared when all communications are cut off. Satellite phones don't rely on cell phone towers, and they work anywhere under the open sky. Satellite Phone Store will give you a free Inmarsat iSat Phone 2 satellite phone with a monthly subscription on select service plans with enough time to provide you with reliable communications between your family and emergency services when you need it the most. To learn more, call 877-705-8839 or go to satellitephonestore.com. Supplies are limited, so call today. 877-705-8839 to hear all options and stay prepared.
Hi, it's AJ with Vibes Mind, Body, Spirit. The Vibes Tribe seeks to assist you in creating and maintaining an uplifting and balanced state of being in your personal space. Palo Santo is a mystical tree that grows on the coast of South America. Palo is loved by many for its energetic cleansing and healing properties and is also popularized for its heavenly presence in keeping your energy grounded and clear. Burning Palo provides an uplifting scent to raise your vibration and is also beneficial for relieving stress, anxiety, depression, and emotional pain. Palo Santo is also known for relieving symptoms of the common cold, headaches, and asthma. We offer Palo Santo in resin, powder, or by the stick. Go to onlinevibes.com for all of your vibration elevation needs and receive a free stick of Palo Santo with any online purchase over $25. Shop onlinevibes.com, that's onlinevibez.com, and get your vibes on today.
For years, the KGRA digital broadcast station has been your contact for live UFO paranormal talk radio worldwide, bringing you the top names in research and investigations 7 nights a week. Our listeners connect to the KGRA on various platforms like TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and many more. Now, you can stream your favorite paranormal talk radio shows with our new fully integrated custom KGRA mobile apps for Android and iPhones. Listen to your favorite paranormal talk shows from any mobile device 24/7, free with smartphone or tablet. Utilize custom features to access news, show pages, archives, contests, events, and live interactive chat room. Set show notification alerts and never miss your favorite live programs. All free and available to download in Google Play or the iTunes App Store. Now you have the inside contact for alternative talk radio. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to the Q.Science Project right here on kgraradio.com. Thanks for sticking around through the break, everyone. I am Jill Hansen, host of The Q, which now comes to you every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific for 2 hours of the most progressive new science talk radio you'll find anywhere. In case you're just joining today's conversation, with me is Maureen J. St. Germain, who has over 25 years of experience in the area of mystical and sacred traditions. She is the author of 4 books, which have been translated into Russian, Italian, and Chinese. And she is also the founder of Akashic Records International. Tonight, the jumping off point for our discussion is Maureen's most recent book, Waking Up in 5D. Now, Maureen, there were a couple of other things that kind of jumped out of me in this book. And honestly, there are these little statements that you made that you just kind of like threw them out there and then just kept on running with something else. Those
that would be me.
Get me. So one of those, you made a statement, and it was in and around the transition from, 3D, the third dimension, to 5D, and you're talking about energetic blockers or disruptors, right? And so these are the things that kind of keep you stuck in 3D or prohibit you from progressing or moving through the vibration to that higher state. Now, and you said, one of the things you said, and you kind of called it out, was programming, which is being beamed. And you just kind of glossed over that. And I'm really curious, when you say programming, which is being beamed to or at or to us, what is it you're talking about, and who's beaming this programming?
So there was a woman who made a blog post, and she showed pictures of her father and video of her father and how he talked about political matters. And after a couple of years of listening to talk radio, he had leaned completely in a very harsh, judgmental direction. And any harsh position, whether it's to the right or to the left, is being fueled by the forces that would have us fail. Now,
right.
I alluded earlier to, and there's more to this answer to the question. I'm partway into it. I alluded to earlier that man's inhumanity to man that plug was pulled.
Right.
And certainly all of these other forces, that energy has been stopped. But we have yet to have it fully play out in the reality. So I'll use the term, even though the battle has been won, it's not played out, and it hasn't finished playing out for a little while yet. And the reason is because they can still, those that would have us fail, can still use our free will. And when we put our free will in those directions, we are fueling the fire. We're also fueling the entities that drive harsh emotions, that drive a person to do harsh things, even when they don't realize how harsh they're being. So there's that energy. And humans have to make these choices because it is a free will planet. So the battle has been won and the high drama is over. But the middle drama is like we're still being tempted a little bit to behave badly. That's the best way I know how to describe it. Now, other forces that are affecting people is, for example, the chemtrails, which dumb down society. Now, I'll give you an example. I expect the chemtrails to stop, and they did stop for a while. And more recently, I knew that they were going to stop. And they stopped being around some of the cities, but some of the other places, they were in full force, like an apple pie lattice. And those places are the national parks. Now, why would the national parks, Zion, Everest, everywhere you go that there's a national park where people are congregating in nature,
No kidding.
They're going full force because why would they do it there? These people are off the internet. They're off the grid. They're not watching their phones very much because they don't get cell service in those places. So why would they make an effort to spray those places? Because it dumbs them down and it puts a chemical that calcifies the pineal and prevents you from having access. And there's all kinds of other ways that they do that because in the food you eat, if you don't read labels, you might eat something that's going to cause that. Fluoride, for example, calcifies the pineal. And the pineal gland is the gateway, if you will, the portal to acquiring access to this energy. And then there's a whole other area of the sinuses called the golden bowl, which serves as the receptor for the divine connection. So when you do certain things like the Merkaba, you get illuminated, and then that energy antidotes the stuff that's being beamed at you. So what it means is when there's a lie that's being postulated on the TV in front of you, you can tell it's a lie. And when someone's saying something to you in person, you know that they're not giving you the whole story. And that's because you have not, the Merkaba, for example, antidotes all those chemicals and all that other stuff and gives you immunity to be fully plugged in.
Right. Okay. That's so interesting because my friend and occasional co-host, Dan Willis, he's always said that the truth has a vibration. And he's always talked about how it's his belief that people, whether they consciously know it or not, that vibration is detectable. And so this kind of like sheds new light on that for me. It gives it new meaning.
Oh yeah, it is detectable. But if your pineal is sealed over from, being calcified, you won't see it anyway. And there is a chemical that they put into those chemtrails that literally dumbs down the population. And they work extra hard when you're in nature, because when you're in nature, your pineal opens. I mean, that's one of the ways you unhook from it. And so you're unhooking from your phone, you're unhooking from the internet, unhooking from work, hiking in the mountains, and now they're spraying.
Yeah.
And in the national parks, because my husband loves the national parks, so we go there frequently, I see them spraying dawn, noon, and dusk. And I was told by my guides that they use the dawn and the dusk because that time is where the drift is the strongest. And so that slow, spread of that chemical is easier, more likely to hit more people. And I'm not sure why they do it at noontime other than that, in the case of the national parks, people are going to open up, with that much sun and that much nature. You can't help it.
Yeah. How interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's something I'm going to have to investigate. I had not heard that yet.
And what I do, it's funny. One time years ago when I was in the national parks, every time I saw the chemtrails, I would antidote them and they would disappear. And so yes, totally. Now this gets better. You have to hear the conclusion.
Yeah.
So halfway into our stay at the national park, I get a really stiff neck. And in my world, where I'm at, when stuff like that happens, there's a spiritual reason behind it. So I said to my husband one morning, have I been hard to get along with? Am I being stubborn? And he said, oh no, you've been totally darling. It's been great. And so then I asked my guides, okay, so what am I being stiff-necked about? And they said, chemtrails. Stop being so, diligent, trying to clear them. First of all, we're working with you and we're building you a new Merkaba.
Yeah.
And we don't want so much attention drawn to you. So I now ask that Mother Mary and the Goddess of Liberty clear the chemtrails if it's appropriate. And I also put myself in a higher dimension where they don't touch me. Because I was shown that my actions, humanity wasn't ready for my actions. It was a number of years ago. And hopefully the chemtrails will be stopping soon. I expect that they'll stop within the next 3 months.
Would be, I would hope. I mean, I hope so. I know that everyone who's aware of what's going on hopes so. It can, be a little. It's hard because you don't know who's doing it and why, and it's hard not to believe that they're not going to just keep right on doing it, right? But this whole idea of antidote. Now, this is fascinating to me. So you just said that you antidote the chemtrails and they disappear. How can we antidote things, and what things can be antidoted?
Anything can be antidoted. Okay, that's number one. Anything can be antidoted. Okay. And I'll tell you how I discovered this. A lot of this stuff I discovered on myself. And of course, I'm very fortunate because of the fact that I've done so much work in this realm that I have developed the clear channel. And also because I came in to do this work, and I've been, focused on the spiritual part most of my life. So what happened to me is, having 4 children, I carried arnica in the diaper bag, and every time a baby, bumped their leg or whatever, I was on it with the arnica. And I was on a bike ride where I was thrown from my bike because my bike caught in a railroad tracks that was at an angle, and I literally flipped and went in the air and spun 3 times before I stopped. So my son, who was behind me and with the group of people, came up to me and said, are you okay? And I said, I think so. And he said, do you have any arnica? And I looked at him and I said, no. And he said, that's too bad. And he started to walk away. And I heard my guide say to me, pretend you are taking it.
Wow.
So I did. So the number one thing to do first to kind of get your body used to taking these kinds of instructions are to take something that you normally have, like aspirin or whatever, that you need to take, and imagine taking it when you don't have it. And, go through the motions, put the pill up to your mouth, take the drink of water, whatever you would normally do. And then after that, then you can start to create antidotes. And you can just say the antidote to such and such. I'm claiming that I have the antidote to the pollen that I'm allergic to in my field, and that it is transformed and antidoted so it doesn't affect me adversely. Now, when you do that, you have to be doing powerful things for yourself. And that goes back to the language of 5D. So one of the most important language of 5D changes that everyone benefits from making is to stop saying, I have to. I have to pick up the kids at daycare. I have to meet my husband. I have to get this report done. I have to go on the air now. Stop using the have to, because it puts the power outside of you. And instead say, I choose to, I'm going to, I want to, I get to. Okay. So once you start doing that, then you've anchored your power back. And it's funny because it's just like you're giving your power to the unknown man out there somewhere, like the company store or something. Okay. Right. So now you've created the ability in your consciousness to be your powerful self. And then you say, I ask for the antidote first. You're asking for it from, the angels or the beings of light. Now, the angels are good for miracles. The Ascended Masters are good for teaching you techniques. So the technique may have come through the masters, but the gift of the antidote itself comes from the angels. You see? I ask for the antidote of such and such. And then you instruct that antidote into my energy field to bring it into place. Now, again, if you're doing the Merkaba, that helps. Another thing that you can do is to do what I call the 5D mind mastery meditation. Now, I released it for free last month, but it's no longer free. Now it's for sale. And I like to do that with my meditation so I can get the word out, but then I take it off. But, they're not expensive. They're under $10 as a MP3. Okay. And the 5D mind mastery is an autogenics recording. And autogenics, again, is scientifically proven that when you talk to your body and you tell it to do certain things on a regular basis, 3 times a day, you actually get the ability to effect change. And asthmatics use it. Anybody with any kind of a chronic autonomous problem that they haven't been able to fix with drugs, they're learning this technique. Mm-hmm. So it's been around for a while. And I'll give you an idea of what it sounds like. My right hand, I'm putting all my awareness on my right hand. My right hand is heavy and warm. My right hand is heavy and warm. My right hand is heavy and warm. So this, and in my case, I say all this stuff for you, and all you have to do is say it after me. So it makes it very nice. Now, in addition to the autogenics side of it, the science side of it. Then I added another piece of science known as binaural rhythm or binaural beats. And binaural beats are proven to unify the left and the right hemisphere because it creates a third tone that unifies. So that's running in the background. So once you start doing this, you're getting a double effect. And that programming allows you to start giving your body instructions of any kind. So after you do the autogenics training for a while, let's say something happens and you're really frightened and you're trying to get the adrenaline back to normal and, you're just struggling, you could just say, I command my body to calm down, to relax, slow your breathing, slow your heartbeat, and your body responds. And it's scientifically proven. That's the cool thing.
That is really cool.
And
now,
that would be a basis then for making those other commands because you're commanding the world around you in the same way because you've exercised your authority. See, if you don't exercise your authority, then it's still there, but it's not used. So for example, if you live in a big house and you've never told the servants what to do, if you say, go do this, they're going to ignore you. They're going to laugh at you.
Right.
They need to see that you know that you have the power to do that. It's again, free will, all about free will.
Right. Interesting. Now, something just came up for me, and I'm wondering, this may not be within your realm of or your scope, I guess, of knowledge. But what you were just saying, my left hand and how you repeated over and over again, that reminds me a lot of the script people repeat when they're doing tapping or EFT. And I know that EFT is supposed to work with the grid, the energy grid of the human body. But is that autogenics as well? I mean, is this? No,
that's not autogenics. And tapping, I'm very aware of tapping, and I use tapping, by the way.
Oh, fantastic.
I love tapping, and I also work with emotional EF and T, which is emotional freedom technique, which is a form of tapping that's even more evolved. And although they're repeating phrases, they're opening the meridians. So just like acupuncture opens the meridians, so they're using a gateway into the body. So it is another way, and they're using the gateways that open up the emotional body, you see?
Gotcha.
And what I was describing is opening and commanding the physical body.
Okay.
This is very cool, and a very cool distinction, and it's a very cool bridge as well, because people who are using tapping and like it will now get the message. Oh yeah, I could do that with my body as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for explaining that. So there was another thing in and around, you explaining these things that can kind of keep us stuck in 3 dimensions versus evolving and into a higher vibration of 5D. You brought up the mass events, whether it be newspapers, watching the news, not participating, but watching sporting events. And you said in this, this is it's paraphrasing, excuse me, but it's pretty darn close to what you said in the book. You said that by participating in these mass events, you basically give permission to receive a download of, quote, company plan, right? Which would be this, I guess, communally accepted structure. Is that how you call them matrix?
Well, what happens is they become part of the group mind. So they adopt hive mind, for lack of a better way to explain it. Right. And because it's part of the bigger machine, football especially, which is such a brutal sport, is creating opportunities. And as a mystic, I was shown this one year when there was a Super Bowl game. And I was given very clear instructions to harvest that energy and direct it in a certain way that was to align people with their highest purpose and their highest a potentiality. And then they told me to go to a local pub and finish watching the game, so that I was part of it. So I was part of it. It was, clearly intending, and then my programming actually overrode the programming that was writing out there. And so sometimes you and I don't even know what that programming might be or what that agenda might be, other than to disrupt, to pervert, to misuse, and to subjugate. So the subjugation occurs all the time when people feel like they don't have choice. And it could be, I don't have a choice. I have to go to this job. And the answer is no, you still have a choice. And you can say, I'm choosing to go to this job because I haven't found anything better. That's okay. But don't say you have to take this job. There's a difference. Have to says there's a gun in my head and I absolutely must do it or I will die. You see? And so you can say, I'm not happy about the decision that I made thus far, but I'm trying to change it, or I'm doing the best I can. That's also owning your power without giving it away, you see? Right. So, and when the reason people give away their power is because they're giving away their allegiance to one team or another, you see? So they choose to root for somebody else. They choose to throw in with everybody else. And honestly, I didn't really see it. And, I spent a lot of years in Wisconsin, and I don't know if you know this about Wisconsin, but you don't live or breathe in Wisconsin if you're not a Green Bay Packers fan.
Yeah, my mom was actually from Wisconsin.
Yeah, and you know this.
Oh, yeah.
And what really shocked me is that in football season, if the Packers lost, people were so down on Monday morning. It blew me away. And I could see it. I could see their energy was sad. Their energy was darker. And the thing is, when I was working for the Chamber of Commerce and I wanted to see what side of the political fence some of our bigger donors were, because I was working on a promotion project, I went to the county courthouse to look up the donors. Now, anybody can do this, by the way. They can go to their county and ask to see the list of the bigger donors, because everybody has to report this. And, I know I was over 40 when I learned this, that the big donors were making contributions to both sides.
Interesting. Although not surprising.
Right. Not surprising once you hear it, but I was shocked.
Yeah.
And so now that I've told you this, I can also say that it is also true that those that would have us fail, or those who would have had us fail, because they're not going to succeed, we're funding both sides of any battle, whether it's a football game or a real live battle. And they're milking the emotion. And they're milking the emotion. And that's the most important thing, because I don't like to focus on the stuff that we don't like, obviously. And I only reference it to give people understanding, not to give them a lot of visual. And so think about how sad the big fans are when their team loses. And that can be milked unless you direct it, you see. And the reason that I say that, especially about football games, and I'm going to go back to, I still haven't finished answering the question, believe it or not, football games, is because in America, the football games work up into a pretty grandiose frenzy in the, now I can't even think what to call it. And that's good, because I'm not going to give it any energy, but you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I used to watch it too. I'm aware and have participated, not even realizing. Now, I talk about other things also. Drinking coffee in the morning, watching the news, watching the weather. Because now, let's take the weather, for example. When you watch the weather, you are watching a prediction, because they cannot predict the weather. There's all kinds of research why you cannot fully predict the weather. They can only give you percentages. That's why they say 80% chance of rain, 20% chance of rain. And what they're literally doing is running all the alternate versions of reality based upon the temperature of the earth, the wind, every little thing. And it's all based on this mathematical principle called the butterfly effect, which we've all heard of, and there was even a movie made about it. So this scientific theory is applied to weather, and it was invented by a guy named Lorenz, a mathematician who was also a weather researcher, went to work for one of the Lawrence Livermore labs, and figured this out, that he could write a software program, but he could never get it to be 100% accurate because, and this was the title of his paper, was the butterfly effect, because the weather in one part of the world, like a butterfly, a leaf falling or a butterfly doing something in Russia could change the weather in Florida the next day. And I don't have the cities right, but the innuendo was there would always be some new thing to change the circumstances of the weather. And this is also why a psychic could never predict with 100% accuracy, because there is free will. There is the possibility of something changing. And it goes back to the storyline I told before about how I was able to give someone advance warning, but they had to choose to not do what they normally do and do something different, which allowed them to get, to change. Everybody said, you know what, we don't need that anymore. Don't bother. So things are very fluid. Now, why is this important? And this is really the bigger issue. It's because humans are in a free fall, free for all. The outcome has been resolved, but how we do it and when we do it is up to us.
Okay.
And so all of the big battles have been won. And what we're working on now is for the humans to catch up. And we're on the fast track. We've got positive energy beaming on us as well. Especially now, there is a very positive influx of energy since 2012, where we're also getting the benefit of light and support from the light. And that means it's easier to make good decisions than not. So it's a little bit like kids who wear a school uniform and they just behave better, even though there really shouldn't be any difference whether they wear a school uniform or not. But the idea of wearing a uniform and feeling respect for yourself changes how you act in situations. So those kids tend to be less outrageous in their behavior. I mean, kids still do stuff, we all know that. But
yeah. So are you attributing, so taking this example of, you say you have a private school where children wear uniforms. Now, are you saying that the uniform attributes a certain amount of self-respect and that's where that behavior comes in? Or is it that because everyone is wearing the same thing, there's this subconscious, observance of equality or oneness?
I don't think the uniform creates the feeling of oneness. It may create a feeling of uniformity in that, kids derive their respect of themselves from their parents or their caregivers and other students. Yeah. So if you're a fat kid and you get made fun of, your self-respect drops. But if everybody's wearing the uniform, then that raises the bar and everybody gets that basic human respect, which allows a youngster then to tap into their higher consciousness, and then their behaviors are like on the positive side of the light. I tell people, and I actually had this experience myself, when you have a son or a daughter that's like really on the edge and they're always in trouble, they're always skipping school, they're always doing stuff that you don't want them to do. Okay. And I felt very strongly about a couple of things. And number one, I was told that children get a certain amount of training from their parents, and that finishes at about age 12. And from age 12, so if you haven't taught them the basics by age 12, it's probably too late. And then by
Oh,
age
man.
12, then they start to move into exploration. And in the exploration stage, they will use what they've been taught unless you start harping on them. And then they will go against what they've been taught just to prove that they can explore, that they can try stuff, that they can be different. So one of the things I tell people is, from age 12 or thereabouts, move into cheerleader mode, not questioning or telling mode. And so and I want to come back to this storyline about the troublesome child. So if I forget, take me back there, because I feel like this,
Okay, I'll try.
That's really important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write it down so I don't forget. The issue is when your child tells you that some kid bullied them and they don't know what they're going to do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're 12 and older, they are not asking you to solve it. They're telling you they're scared and they don't know what to do.
Okay.
When you, as a parent, say to them, well, what are you going to do, honey? They know that they have the power. You've empowered them.
Right.
You see?
That's
And
brilliant.
then they'll use the stuff they've learned from you to solve it. If you say, well, if when I was your age, blah, 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 then they're going to not do that, because they don't want to do what they're being told. They want to think it through, and they're asking for your help. And a classic example is my college student had made plans for the summer, and his father, who I was divorced from, said to me, well, you knew about his plans long before I did, and he told you. And he said he never told me. And I said, well, what did you ask him? And he said, well, I asked him if he was going to work at the hardware store again like he did last year. Well, my question to him was, have you made any plans for the summer? Now, the difference is a boy wants to please his dad. So when his dad asked, he was going to work at the hardware store, even though he knew he was going to go work at a law firm as a runner in another city, he said to his dad, well, I haven't made up my mind, or things are up in the air. I'm not sure. Right. Because he didn't want to disappoint his father.
Mm-hmm.
So cheerleader role, that means, how are you going to solve this? And I know you'll do the right thing. Everybody who's got a parent, everyone who's a parent to a teenager who's listening, memorize those two phrases, and your kids will tell you everything. If you can memorize those phrases, and that's your response when they tell you something. Or, the parent who's dealing with a daughter who says, things are getting really hot and heavy. I'm not sure if I even want to cross that line, blah, 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 blah. Instead of the parent saying, oh my God, you can't do that. It's a mortal sin. Or, when I was your age, we never did that. Whatever it is. Right. Instead, to say, how are you going to solve that, honey? The child revert to what they've been taught. And that's why, you have to honor that. If they ask a second time the same question, like, I really don't know what I'm going to do, though. What do you think, Mom? Then they're ready to hear your advice. But don't give advice the first time.
Right.
Give the cheerleader the first time.
Yeah.
Now,
and
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's also some implied judgment in some of those statements, right? Like, are you going to work at the hardware store this summer?
Right. And truly, my son's father wasn't being judgmental. He was trying to fill the gap of what was going to happen.
But as the person who's being asked the question, it might feel like there's an expectation, because that is such a specific question,
exactly,
that you follow through with that, right?
Exactly. So he chose to do the law thing, but he didn't tell his dad till it was a fait accompli. And then he told his dad.
Right.
So now let's go back to the problem child. So I recommend this prayer if you have a child that's always in trouble and you're really freaking out over it. This comes right out of my work in Be a Genie. So if this is your situation, or you have any other situation you're trying to manifest, understand that you can control the reality. You have to do your part. You have to show up. But at the same time, you can and will succeed. And here's what you do. You imagine that teenage child as an adult. They're 22, 24, somewhere in that range. And they're calling you from wherever they live. That means they're not living at home. That's the first sign. Okay? They're not living at home.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
They're calling you from somewhere else. Okay?
Okay.
And then they say to you what they're doing. And they're telling you some big adventure that they're on. Okay? And then you're imagining you're hearing this. Okay? You don't know what the words are, but you know they're telling you some adventure. And your response is, I am so proud of you. And I am so happy that you are so happy.
Yeah.
That is a manifestation movie based upon the scientific principles found in Be a Genie. It's based on the phi ratio, which is source code for everything. And I'm not going to explain it because I don't want to do that on the radio with the time we have available. I have videos on this on YouTube. You can watch that, or you can read my book, Be a Genie. And this visual is you pretending that you're getting a phone call from this errant son or daughter, and they're telling you how, some fantastic story about what's going on in their life. And you're hearing it thinking, this is so cool. I am so proud of you, and I am so happy. Now, what you're doing is you're not pushing them. You're not, putting a curse on them or anything like that. What you're doing is weighting, just like the school uniform, the reality. Okay. You're weighing the reality, or weighting the reality with the energy that supports the optimal outcome.
Right. Like,
isn't that cool?
That is really cool. That is really cool. Yeah.
So even if your kids aren't teenagers, you can still imagine that happens,
Yeah.
Brings it in.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of thinking and that kind of, I guess, waiting or preloading can be done with virtually anything. Fascinating. So, Maureen, towards the end of the book, you bring up what you've called your bedtime matrix, and you use this as something to do before bed, which you say changes your reality. Can you walk us through that bedtime matrix?
Yes, I can, and I want to tell you why it's so powerful. When we announce our intentions, especially for the following day, as we go to sleep, we're actually setting the matrix or setting the energy field to prepare us to accomplish that as we wake up. Initially, I started saying this prayer silently, like I would say other prayers silently. And one day I said it out loud because my husband was too tired to read it. And he said, just read it to me. And I found that I had a much bigger response. And this response, by the way, produces a really good rest. The prayer itself produces a much easier dream time, a much nicer dream time, and you do wake up in 5D. And the way you know that is because you wake up happy and you wake up feeling good. Even if there's a part of you that's in pain, as you sit up, you go, I felt pretty good, except for that one thing, And so even that is improved. And the prayer that's in the book is a wonderful, wonderful prayer, and you can use that. But those of you who have stayed with us this long into the call deserve to get the most updated version. And I only released this as an updated version to my year-long students. So you're getting in on the really, really yummy stuff. So you can use page 9 if you want, or you can do what we're going to do here. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
So I'm going to pretend you're my bedtime partner, and you're going to repeat after me.
Okay.
I am getting a good rest and will awaken well rested, no matter what the night holds.
That is a long sentence for me to remember.
Okay, I'll do it smaller. I'm getting a good rest.
I'm getting a good rest.
And I will awaken well rested.
And I will awaken well rested.
No matter what the night holds.
No matter what the night holds.
I claim.
I claim
that I am waking up in 5D.
that I am waking up in 5D.
I am setting up an energetic Faraday cage
I am setting up an energetic Faraday cage
around my bed
around my bed
to eliminate any EMF
to eliminate any EMF
or any other energies
or any other energies
inappropriate for life,
inappropriate for life,
so that I am sleeping undisturbed and unaffected.
Undisturbed and unaffected.
I am entering a reverse aging machine.
I am entering an anti-aging, or what? I'm sorry, a reverse
aging machine. Mm-hmm.
I am entering a reverse aging machine.
That is already set up for me.
That is already set up for me.
I am awakening incrementally younger.
I am awaking incrementally younger.
Pain-free, disease-free.
Pain-free, disease-free.
Negative energy-free and healthy each day.
Negative energy-free and healthy each day.
I am opening my pineal gland to distribute my pineal gland energies.
I am opening my pineal gland to distribute my pineal gland energies
throughout my body, radiating outward in a torus formation.
In a torus formation.
This helps me relax into the energies
that
the earth is going through. I now activate my Genesis cells.
I command my Genesis cells to activate now. Let me say that 3 times. I command my Genesis cells to activate now. I command my Genesis cells to activate now. I
One more
command
time.
my Genesis cells to activate now.
I now command my entire DNA to support.
I now command my entire DNA to support
the full activation of my Genesis cells.
the full activation of my Genesis cells.
I now command bolts of God's crystalline light.
Bolts of God's crystalline light
to blaze in, through, and around my self-healing DNA. Strands to cleanse, heal, and activate them. And to speed up the self-healing process. Allowing them to expand and grow. I am happy, wealthy, and wise. I am grateful. For this great day. Great opportunities. And great friends. I am grateful for every good thing coming my way. And then we usually end with namaste.
That is something else, Maureen.
Now, I've picked out a couple of things that I'm sure you want to talk about, but since you were reciting after me, you might not have caught them. So I'm going to tell you that you probably want me to talk about the Faraday cage, and you probably want to talk about the reverse aging machine and the self-healing DNA strand. So
yeah, go right into that, because absolutely I was going to ask you about those things anyway.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
To say I'm plugged in. I knew you were going to ask about those things.
The Faraday
cage.
cage.
Go ahead. So the Faraday cage, you're in the science side, a lot of your listeners are going to know what a Faraday cage is, but let me explain. It is an energetic device, and it comes out of the work of the early scientists in espionage. There were many scientists who were saying radio waves could affect you. And because it couldn't be seen, many other scientists said, no way, that's not possible. They don't affect you, nothing happens. And this battle went back and forth and back and forth. But then what happened is the Russian embassy, all the people got sick with something that was the same, approximately the same disease, and it was unique and different. And so they started asking, maybe it is the radio waves. Well, the Russians were, years ahead of us in this technology, and they were actually beaming these waves, adverse waves, onto the American embassy in Russia, in Moscow. So the scientists who were the proponents of, it's affecting you, said, build this metal frame. So they put these metal frames around every window, everywhere that the energy could come into the American embassy, to create a Faraday cage out of the whole building. So a Faraday cage can be something as simple as a steel tank where nothing can get in. And it has a Faraday cage has the quality of eliminating any communications of any kind, and especially EMF and higher frequency radio waves. For example, you could be in some of those bigger department stores that are really deep, like Costco or, I don't know, Fry's or something like that. And you go in and you get to a certain point in the store and your cell phone won't work anymore. And that's the same kind of energy. So we know it exists. So once you know something exists, you can create it. You can replicate it. And if you have an activated Merkaba, you can do it. If you're self-autonomous and you're claiming that by owning everything you say, not just, the dog ate my homework, but you own what you're doing, you own it. And it doesn't mean you have to apologize, but you're owning it, okay? Yeah, I'm the one that left the burner on, like that. You're owning it. So that self-power goes back to that have-to statement. So that empowers you then to command your reality. That's how you can replicate the Faraday cage. Now, what happened for me is I felt this energy enter my ear one night when I was crawling in bed. And it was that piercing feeling. And some of you may have felt this when you put a cell phone to your ear. And it's like this really piercing sound, but it's more pain than it is sound. Yeah. And you pull the phone away and you kind of look at it and then you put it back and it's gone. Well, what's happening is you're in fourth dimension, you've slid into the higher dimension, and then you've got the phone at your ear and you're actually feeling what it actually does. You can't tell it at third dimension, but you can feel it at fourth dimension. So I felt this and I was like, oh my God, what is that? And I was told, and it was my router. So my office was directly below the master bedroom. So I got up out of bed and went downstairs and unplugged the router. The next day we put a timer on it so it would shut off before we went to bed. Not everyone can do that. And if you live in an apartment building, even if you turn your own router off, you're getting everybody else's, because every time you open up your phone, you got like 20 choices, right? So you want that energetic Faraday cage around your bed, and that energy then will not affect you while you sleep.
Yeah.
And now, even the spouses of the people who are in my Ascension program are attesting to the value of that bedtime prayer, just for that one reason, because they can feel how much better sleep they get. They can get deeper and everything else.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing I was going to talk about is the reverse aging machine. Now, I have known about the reverse aging machines before anybody ever talked about it. And one day I heard Corey Good talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I've seen those. And I'm going to start manifesting that I have one ready for me on one of the motherships, and I'm just going to go park my body there at night. So that's what I do.
Fascinating.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, more recently, I learned about, many of you know about the original cells and the original divine matrix. It was talked about by a lot of spiritual teachers as the 4 original cells. And another spiritual teacher named the 4 cells the Genesis cells. And I like that name, so I'm using it. So that's your divine matrix. So when you're calling in your Genesis cells to activate, you're literally saying, I want my divine blueprint. I want the original plan. No matter how much I've deviated, let's bring on the original plan. Very, very powerful. It's like claiming your divine place. And it's like a GPS. You know, if you make a wrong turn, first your GPS might say, please make a legal U-turn. But if you keep going and don't make the U-turn, they give you a new route.
Right,
So
reroute.
Right.
Yeah.
This is you claiming I'm back on track.
Oh my
I
God.
am on track. And you'll notice I didn't say the right track. I just said I am back.
Yeah.
I am back on track.
Mhm.
Because whenever we make choices, and this is not widely known, there are not infinite choices, and they're not infinite versions of the reality or infinite alternate versions. There's only a few, and they're all funded by you. So when you stop funding it with either your regret or your anger, it dissipates and stops existing. So in this case, we're funding our divine plan and choosing to align with that's the most important one. And I tell people the 5 choices are 2 below grade, 2 above grade, and 1 divine choice. Your divine choice is your fastest. You know, that's the express lane or the express train, as I like to refer to it. You know, I take the express train to the higher realms when I go to bed at night. I don't bother stopping in the lower realms. That's another matter. Okay, now the self-healing DNA strand. So we haven't talked about that. So it turns out that the reason we age is because the self-healing DNA strands were turned off. Otherwise, we would self-heal and we could live as long as we want.
Yeah.
So I've asked God himself, to put bolts of lightning. It is really like bolts of lightning. I call it bolts of light. But it's truly like you would see bolts of lightning, okay, to blaze in through and around the self-healing DNA strands, because if you can revive them, then they can work for you.
That's amazing. So I of course read the one that you have in the book, but then the one that you just, thank you so much for sharing that on the show. I feel so honored that you put that out there for us. And I could feel, talk about if that was food, that was like the most nutrient dense meal. It was just like every word was meaningful and intentioned and powerful. So I can really feel, it was just amazing. I can't wait to give that a shot. And also, hopefully, my listeners give it a try, and then I would love to have feedback. And if I do receive any feedback, Maureen, I'll pass it your direction. But that was just phenomenal, just conceptually amazing, and I could feel it.
Excellent. So, it's very helpful to me to even have someone like you say that you can feel it. I feel it.
I was just beaming. As I was repeating it, I could feel it.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Now, unfortunately, we are at the end of the show. What an amazing way to end the show. So again, thank you so much for, it's a real gift what you just gave to me and all of my listeners. So thank you again for that.
My pleasure.
Now, I do want to make sure, again, that everyone is able to pick up your book and can follow your work through your website, which is MaureenStGermain.com. It's spelled MaureenStGermain.com. And the book is Waking Up in 5D. I highly recommend it for everyone. obviously through conversation, we're only able to touch on certain aspects of it. I have a whole list of things here that we didn't even have the opportunity to talk about in 2 hours. So it's definitely worth a read. And congratulations again on the award, basically the award, the amazing
bestsellers
feedback
across America. Yeah.
Yes. What an amazing thing. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, everyone. That's a wrap on this Wednesday's episode of the Q.Science Project. I want to personally thank each of you for spending the last 2 hours with me and my guest, Maureen J. St. Germain. A big thank you also to my producer, Bill, for keeping this shit afloat as always. Next week, please join me and my co-host, Dan Willis, when we welcome back to the Q. To the Q's once monthly special broadcast show, Objective Reality, Dr. Michael Salla, who will be with us to discuss his new book, Antarctica's Hidden History, Corporate Foundations of Secret Space Programs. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, you can keep up with the Q between now and next Wednesday by following @Q.Science, and that's spelled Q.PScience. And lastly, don't forget to pull up the Q calendar at qscience.org and comment on the event dedicated to today's show with the wonderful Maureen J. St. Germain. Let me know what you thought of today's conversation, comments, questions, guest suggestions, whatever. It's all great. I would love to hear from you and know you're out there. Wishing everyone smooth sailing until we meet again. I'll meet you right back here at the new Bat Time, same Bat channel next Wednesday to peel back another few layers of perception and reality. Right now, stay tuned for our very own AJ and her beautifully authentic soul wanderings from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 8 p.m. Pacific. With that, this is Jill Hansen, host of the Q Science Project on KGRARadio.com, signing off. Good night, everyone.